On this episode of Book Reports Podcast,
Bryce is Irish.
And much, much more. Hey there, listeners. Welcome to Book Reports Podcast. Just for this special Thanksgiving episode, it's all about family and all about being together. And so we both invited our families to be along for this episode. But my brother had a thing. He was kind of busy, actually, so he couldn't make it. I invited my parents, and they said they were going to come. But last minute, my mom said she left the stove on, and my dad was doing his hair.
I also invited my family, but my sister and my mother both went to Bryce's brother's thing instead. So,
Sam and Bryce.
Once again.
I think this is sort of the can of cranberry sauce of the podcasting world.
How so?
I mean,
it retains the shape of what it's contained in? Because I guarantee you I do not do that. I tend to spread right outside of my can, thank you very much.
I mean, we're definitely not the highlight, but I mean, people do enjoy us.
Oh, we are the mashed potatoes to our guest stuffing.
No, mashed potatoes are a highlight of Thanksgiving.
This podcast is done.
How dare... I'm Irish. What do you think I live off of?
Sometimes, when somebody loses a loved one, they become hoarders and they try to fill the void of that lost loved one with possessions and items. That's exactly what we're doing today. Bryce and I went to a library book sale over the summer, and we brought in a small amount of our haul. Well, that's not really true. Bryce brought his entire haul, and I brought a small amount of mine. Didn't think you had time for me to describe 64 books to you, listeners. We're going to be talking about selections that we are excited to read later on in the year. Maybe we'll bring them to the show again to give you a more in-depth review, but for now, these are just books that we are looking forward to reading.
Listeners, if you hear a book that you like the description of, or like you've read it and you really want us to cover it, definitely let us know, either by email or by Facebook. You can get those links at the end of the podcast. And I was going to say, maybe we'll cover them. No, we're definitely going to cover them. So 100% if you suggest one of our books, because we like these books, that's the reason we picked them.
Hopefully we'll like them.
Yes.
One of the books Bryce got from this library sale, he did not enjoy.
And I did it in the last episode. So guess which one it was.
John Carter of Mars. But we both really enjoy library book sales. Just a fantastic way to be able to try your luck on a brand new book that you haven't heard of, or if there's a subject you want to learn more about, a library book sale is a great place to go to be able to just get a book really, really cheap that you might enjoy.
Sam has my books. I have Sam's books.
So we're going to go back and forth sharing books that we are looking forward to read from the
fantabulous.
The Nipsey Russell Memorial Union County Library.
Hey, everybody, read a book.
We're big fans of the Union County Public Library book sale. We are delighted to have gotten so many terrific new books from this.
Before we get started, I kind of want to ask you, what is your criteria, like when you go to a library book sale of, when you pick up a book or like you go to a section, what are you looking for versus what are you going to put back and think, no, I don't want that?
Well, at a library book sale, I usually find myself going around to every single table, including romance, because you never know when a science fiction is going to be tossed in there by accident.
Ladies!
They're all paperbacks, so it's easy for me to get confused. Sometimes you find something great at the romance table. Sometimes you find something great at the romance table. Hey!
Isn't that the title of your romance novel?
It absolutely is. Love at the library book sale. Their hands met, clutching a copy of Lust in the Dust. I have two broad categories I usually look for at a library book sale. My wallet usually has 2 or 3 papers in it that are just lists of books that I'm actively looking for. Usually it's a series that I've started collecting, and this way I can just kind of continue on cheaply.
Most people put money in their wallet, but I mean, you...
I think we can all agree there's not money in my wallet. That has never been a problem.
Are you listening, pickpockets?
I pity anybody that mugs me. I mean... What a waste of effort. It's like, be sure to drink your Ovaltine.
You're going to get like a tap on the shoulder and be like, here! It's the guy handing you your wallet back. Just angry.
Yes. They'll probably feel bad for me. Like, okay, here, I added some for you.
And here's the 10th book in the John Carter series. It was $3, you cheapskate.
That is exactly right. All these books are out of print. You can get them anywhere. Come on. But yeah, usually it's a list of books I'm trying to finish the series, or I'm looking for books that I don't know a darn thing about that look really, really fun. A library book sale is a great place to pick up cheap books that you don't know if they're going to be good or not. This is especially great at the history section. Sometimes I can find a book that relates to another book I've read and has a bit more detail on something I found interesting. Sometimes I can find something that relates closely to something that's just an area of interest for me, or something I don't know a darn thing about, and now I can get started reading about it. That's always nice. And it's a library book sale. If I don't like the book, well, no big loss there.
Oh no, I accidentally supported a local library. library.
Not again! You've won this round, local library. You've got my nickel. What about you? What are you looking for?
Definitely always go straight to the history section.
Mm-hmm.
And I like reading about World War II, as any of you have ever listened to the previous episodes.
I'm sorry, what was the name of that war again?
This is an obscure war that happened in Europe, I think.
Oh, yeah, EU Europe.
Yeah. And somewhere else in the world, probably, too. But yeah, I like to read World War II books, which is great about the library sale that we mentioned, because they just put those out in the open. If there's a book about the Civil War, they put that in like their special room.
Yeah, the one where you have to pay extra.
Yeah. And so I'll go straight to the history section, and I'll try to look and see what books. Like I'll go title by title by title all the way down.
Oh yeah. That's how you look for books.
Yeah.
Just browsing by color doesn't do it.
Sometimes.
Sometimes.
From the history section, then I go maybe the autobiography section, which is usually connected to it, and I try to see if there's autobiographies or biographies of interesting people.
I was going to say there's an autobiography and a biography section.
Yeah.
This is
I don't
good library
touch that
book sale.
biography section.
If it's not from the horse's mouth, I don't want it.
From there, I'll go over to the comedy section.
I tend not to do very well in the comedy section.
I don't either, but I mean, I'm willing to give it like a good 5-minute pass over. As I paint the doorway above the comedy section. And I asked the librarian, why do we eat these bitter herbs?
Well, I think unless there's a Dilbert or like a Far Side book, there probably isn't too much that I pick up in the comedy section anymore.
Yeah, and I mean, maybe it's just the nostalgia of the first year I went, I found some good comedy books, and
okay.
I'm hoping to strike gold again.
So after the comedy section, where do you then frisk off to?
Well, I do a quick passover I gotta stop saying passover. I do a quick visit to the...
Bryce is Jewish!
Then do a quick visit to the sci-fi section, realize there's nothing for me here. There will never be anything for me here. I'm just reminding myself.
Now that I've got all the Harry Potter books, there's no reason to come back here.
Then I go over to the sports section, and I kind of just look for maybe a baseball book or something like that.
That's funny. I go to the sports section because it's sports and games. And I always think to myself, is this the year I'm going to find a role-playing game book in this section?
Oh, I don't think you will.
Know.
Once I realize, I've only picked up 4 books, then I do a pass back to the books in the history section, and I lower my standards to, okay, I guess I might read this one.
Well, yes, I do the exact same thing. After going through all the books one time, I do tend to go back over to see, number one, has a new box of books come out, because that happens during the day. And 2, because of the way the books are laid out on these tables, a second Passover means I'm going to find stuff I didn't before, because my eyes are going to glaze over some things if I'm reading too quickly. I mean, that's just how it's going to happen. So that's just sort of the fun. It's a treasure hunt for me. Finding stuff in a library book sale is all about that spark of, oh, it's here, or, ooh, this looks like fun. That's a whole part of the experience.
Sam, you picking this book was one hell of a gamble, let me tell you. Let me read the title now. Oh, one hell of a gamble. Khrushchev, Castro, and Kennedy, 1958 to 1964, The Secret History of the Cuban Missile Crisis by Alexander Fursenko and Timothy Naftali.
Good job. Good job.
I'm done with my part. I said the words right.
This is a book all about the Cuban Missile Crisis, which is going to be fun by itself. I mean, the history of the Cold War is something I don't know if you know this, but I really enjoy espionage. And it's going to be all over this book. But the perspective of the authors of this book is doubly interesting. This book is written by Alexander Fursenko, who is a Russian historian, and Timothy Naftali is a Yale professor of history, which means he's probably a CIA recruiter. I mean, that's kind of how that goes.
I was going to say, Naftali is definitely a Jewish name, since that was one of the tribes of Israel. Not one of the more popular ones, but it was a tribe.
Naftali, yeah.
I think it wasn't an F, it was a PH.
That's interesting.
Trust me, but don't come into this house expecting to just bring Jewish names in and don't think I'm going to know what tribe it is.
I would never dream of doing that. But to have a Russian historian and an American historian work together to write a book about the Cuban Missile Crisis, which was basically a proxy war between Russia and America in Cuba, that's a really fun perspective on this book. It's a great subject, and to have these two guys writing it together that's just going to be a lot of fun. When I was first starting to read nonfiction, I read a book called Red Heat, which was all about the proxy war in the Caribbean between America and Russia. So this promises, I hope, to have the same kind of fun, the same kind of interesting facts all through it.
I don't know a lot about the Cuban Missile Crisis and that whole thing, but what I do know, we put missiles on the border of Turkey
Yeah.
And that scared the Russians, but that's something like nowadays we kind of look at what they did. They put missiles in Cuba, 90 miles away from Florida.
To be fair, Cuba wasn't a great place thanks to America in some ways.
Yeah.
America's interventions in South America and Central America were not always beneficial to the people living there. We like this guy because he's willing to take our money as opposed to Russia's sometimes. We set up some pretty terrible dictators. We back some pretty terrible dictators. There are two sides to every war, including the Cold War, and America was decidedly not blameless there either.
Back then, with Kennedy and Khrushchev, they had that secret back channel that they created. It's like, listen, we need to solve this quietly.
Right.
But what Kennedy said is, we'll take our missiles out quietly. You take yours out. But we're really going to shout like, hey, look what powerful America did. We told them to take the missiles away.
Well, it is called mutually assured destruction for a reason. I mean, both sides know what's at stake here.
Yeah.
Neither side really wanted to get into any kind of mix-up. Nobody's going to win. There is no winner here. There's just a survivor.
Problem nowadays is that we shouted louder so they listened. And
that's true for all history.
We think that we can do that now instead of let's meet them behind closed doors and talk to them one-on-one as humans.
But that's true for everybody's history in every single country.
Yeah.
That's one reason why I'm looking forward to seeing the Russian perspective. I think it'll be also fun to maybe see how Russia has portrayed it too. Mm-hmm. They had even more control of the free press than America did. It'd be fun to see if there's any kind of spin they put on that side as well. I think it would be really fun to see as well. Bryce, I think you picked up a prequel. I think I'm getting this right.
I think so.
This is Young Al Capone, The Untold Story of Scarface in New York by William Balsamo and John Balsamo. When you set this book down, I looked at it and I thought, it only covers from 1899 to 1925? And then I saw the title, Young Al Capone. Okay, that's fine. But for a second there, I was like, what? Why would you only cover that?
There's definitely something so interesting about mob bosses. Mm-hmm. I read that in that previous book about the bank robber, and I think that maybe have started the spark of, this is such an interesting time in American history, and we don't really get maybe mobsters in Europe or Asia and stuff like that, but it definitely seems like an American thing, especially around that time. Hold these guys in high esteem, the people that go into banks, rob them because you're robbing the bank, you're not really robbing the people. Out of all these bank robbers and gangsters, I think Al Capone is definitely seen as the most famous, if not one of the most famous gangsters of this time. And I love Chicago deep dish, so maybe he'll mention that.
I love the Chicago improv scene, so I'm hoping that's going to be all over this book. That's a good example of what you go to library book sale for. You have a subject that you are kind of interested in learning more about, and you find a book that falls within that, take a chance, pick it up. Exactly what you should do with this section.
I'm hoping that there's enough interesting things in his early life to write a book about, but also, just because a book was written doesn't mean it was a good book.
No, that's very true.
But enough of interesting things that happened in his early years, and also his formative years, that made him the dangerous man that he later became. Before we go to this next one, I want to mention how many times I've heard of P.G. Wodehouse since the last time you did a P.G. Wodehouse book.
That's fantastic.
And I was like, I am so glad Sam mentioned this to me.
Where have you been hearing about Wodehouse?
Just on TV, or like, I think Stephen Colbert actually mentions like, have you read any P.G. Wodehouse?
Oh, fantastic. That's good to hear.
And if I remember, that's where we got Jeeves from Ask Jeeves from.
This is Jeeves and Wooster, yeah. But how does that relate to this book, Bryce?
Well, oddly enough, it doesn't, because you've read World War II. So you picked Wodehouse on Crime, A Dozen Tales of Fiendish Cunning by P.G. Wodehouse.
And a foreword by Isaac Asimov. That's going to be really fun to see.
For listeners who don't know who Isaac Asimov is, he's a very famous sci-fi writer. He is the one who wrote the laws of robotics. Let's see if I can remember them. Probably won't, so you get to make fun of me. Robots must be named Rosie and clean your house.
You got it right so far. 1 for 1. 2, all the dogs must be named Astro. And 3, the women have to have ridiculously thin waists. Done.
Robots can't hurt humans.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know the rules just so you can correct
or through
me?
an action cause a human to be harmed.
Second one, you can't refuse a command by a human unless it goes against the first law.
Yeah.
And the third law is an object in motion stays in... No.
You're close. The third law is that the robot basically needs to protect itself, but it can be superseded by the first 2 laws.
That's right. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's Isaac Asimov.
Who wrote the foreword to this book. But what you don't realize, man, is Isaac Asimov wrote more than just science fiction. He wrote tons and tons and tons of nonfiction, too. He wrote science books for kids. He wrote a guide to the Bible, which I have, despite not being a Christian. That'll be fun to read. I've got his guide to Shakespeare.
You're not a Christian?
Yeah, Isaac Asimov won me over. I've got his Guide to Shakespeare on my shelf. Like, he is a prolific writer on absolutely everything. So it'll be really fun to see his perspective on Wodehouse. But beyond that, that's just the forward. The real fun of this book for me is I have read pretty much all of Wodehouse's short stories with Jeeves and Wooster, but nothing else. So this is a short story compilation of stories having to do with crime that Wodehouse wrote. And only 2 of them are Jeeves and Wooster.
Oh, interesting.
So I'm going to be able to read all these other characters that I have not read before. So I'm looking forward to that. Coincidentally, it looks like the person who had this book previously also only wrote Jeeves and Wooster stories because they put check marks next to 2 of the stories, and the 2 stories they check marked are the Jeeves and Wooster ones.
Oh, that's interesting.
So, I don't know, maybe they stopped reading it partway through or whatever, but it's going to be really fun to read more Wodehouse, to have my Wodehouse horizons expanded greatly by reading other characters.
Now, I see there is a bookmark in there. Are you halfway through this book?
No. That is another reason I like used books. I love just finding things in these books. This is a bookmark from Time Magazine telling me to eat certain foods and not other foods.
Time Magazine, if you're listening, be sure to feature us in your magazine.
Please. But this is just going to be a lot of fun to read. This is another book I'm really looking forward to reading. Wodehouse is such a fun author to just sit and read and enjoy. They're just an absolute delight. You got here a book that my rich Republican blood practically made burst into flames the second I picked it up. You've got here Promise Me Dad by Joe Biden.
Yes.
Why did you pick this up, Bryce?
So I have seen so many talk shows where Joe Biden has gone on and talked about this book, and I know the broad strokes of it is that after his son Beau died, well, actually before his son died, he's talking to Beau, and he says, promise me, Dad, that you'll move on from this, that you won't allow my death. I think he was like dying from cancer or like something like something that wasn't like a sudden car crash.
There aren't many things that are like a sudden car crash.
Yes.
That's a broad
like
spectrum.
Cancer.
Yeah, like cancer.
It's a lot slower than a car crash.
Depends on the car. Ford Focus.
Hey! This is not Saturn V.
Yeah, Saturn V, you'd never live. Your death from it would be quick and merciless.
They'd be lucky to find a toenail. You just turn into a mist and go into the wind.
Yeah, Saturn V accidents are called acts of God in the insurance forms.
I think I saw a Saturn V just briefly, but I can't prove it. He told his father, Joe Biden, he's like, promise me, Dad, that you're going to move on from this, that you're actually not just going to dwell on this death and sadness, but that you're actually going to go make the world a better place, that you're going to go do good. Just the way that Joe Biden loved his children, I think it showed a lot of his character in these interviews that I saw of him. Everyone's like, oh, are you going to run in 2020? Yes or no? It's like, well, right now I just need to focus on my family. And just, I think that showed a lot of the character of Joe Biden. It's like, even though he and I aren't the same political party, I think I can respect him enough as a man of character.
Okay, sure. When was this?
This is, I think, last year.
Oh, wow, okay.
I was watching a documentary of John McCain, and it was called For Whom the Bell Tolls, and it was all about his life and especially his time in Congress. And they interviewed Joe Biden, just saying, like, and even though they were different political parties, he was saying, like, what a man of high character that John McCain was. And I think even coming from Joe Biden, that means so much more because Joe Biden was a man of high character. It's going to be an interesting read just because it is from Joe Biden's perspective. I think it's going to be probably about his life with his son, but also probably about making the world a better place, I would assume. Sam, what did you find interesting about Larson's Book of Cults by Bob Larson?
Well, the one section I usually don't find books in, but the one that holds the most promise for fun books is the religious section. That is the section where they put all the astrology books, all the ancient Atlantis books. So sometimes you can get lucky. When I saw Larson's Book of Cults, bingo. This is going to be a lot of fun. Bob Larson is a Christian author who wrote in the 80s during the Satanic Panic, and he is basically giving a rundown about the beliefs of all these different cults and religions. He's got pseudo-Christian cults, he's got occult, mystical cults, he's got personality cults. What's fun for me in this book is, number one, Bob Larson is a Christian. That's how I identify myself too, as a Christian, so I'm going to agree with his perspective most of the time. However, he is writing this in the middle of the 80s during the Satanic Panic. So I'm also kind of hoping for some of that every single person who isn't a Christian is secretly a Satanist kind of vibe. If you look at the font on the cover, you can kind of get a little bit of that out of the font too. Also, look at that hair.
That's what I was looking at earlier.
The picture of Bob Larson on the back could not look more like a white Christian man in the 80s. That is...
He's got chops.
He's about to deliver a potluck dinner in Minnesota, I'm pretty sure. There are UFO cults in here. He's got the Rajneeshis in here. He's got all kinds of fun cults that I'm going to have a lot of fun reading. He has certain things he says about each cult. He has appeal, major symbols of it, the purpose, and it talks about the errors of it, like what it gets wrong about its worldview compared to Christianity. Now, it is, like I said, 80s, satanic panic, worried Christian perspective. Mm-hmm. Like he's got yoga in here as one of the cults. And while there is Eastern practices in yoga, I'll be curious to see how far into this is secretly Satan. He's going to go into that one. Secretly Satan, a new fragrance.
It's devilishly good.
Secretly Satan is a reality TV show. It's like Undercover Boss.
Which one's Satan? It's like everyone's like in business suits and then like there's Lucifer.
And there's one guy dressed as the devil.
I bet it's Diane.
Bryce, this is a book I can tell you picked up solely because of the title.
People named Bryce are great. There's a lot to this book.
How the Irish Saved Civilization, the untold story of Ireland's heroic role from the fall of Rome to the rise of medieval Europe, Thomas Cahill. By Thomas Cahill.
Including Thomas Cahill.
Such as Thomas Cahill.
And others.
Vince Lombardi. Janet Reno.
Like 182.
By Thomas Cahill.
I was immediately sold at the point of how the Irish saved. Done. I've already picked it up in the bag. I don't need to hear anymore. It's like, yes, we did. Because listeners, I don't know if you know this, but I'm Irish. I'm not only a fan, I'm also a member.
When Bryce wishes you a happy St. Patrick's Day, he means it. You've just been blessed.
I say that instead of happy birthday. Or Merry Christmas. Because it means more.
Instead of saying good morning. Yeah. Ladies, Bryce wants to make your shamrock shake.
So I immediately just assumed how the Irish saved civilization, the history of the potato was going to be the rest of the subtitle. But then I did see, oh yeah, I guess they were around Roman times and continued to live through medieval Europe. Definitely when you think of the English Isles during the Roman Empire, you only really hear of England.
Well, that's not what this is.
What, the Irish? Yeah. What happened?
Well, the fall of Rome is the beginning.
Well, I mean, they must have helped. Why else would
Why didn't you read this book before you brought it?
I'm pretty sure Rome was doing pretty great, then the Irish showed up, then Rome fell. Coincidence? I don't think so. That's right.
Exactly right.
I definitely think it's going to be the Ireland's contribution to society. They've definitely contributed to American society. Look at me! Well, I always like to point out the Irish were building the railroad from the east, the Chinese from the west. Look how far west we got compared to how east they got. We're definitely better at railroads. Okay?
Feel free to comment and like us on iTunes.
But what I think is interesting, back when Irish weren't seen as people.
Yeah, way back then.
They were still... Hey, wait a minute. They lived in the same neighborhoods as African Americans. Yeah, you're all subhumans. You can go live in the crappy part of town. And so the Irish were like, we don't care what you look like. Let's have babies together. And so that's where you get African Americans with Irish names, like Shaquille O'Neal. He didn't adopt the name O'Neal. He probably has Irish ancestry somewhere in his bloodline. And so I think that's just...
I just want to say, I think we skipped over a bit too. I don't care what the color of your skin is. Let's make babies together. That's a really great line.
I kept going and you got
stuck
behind because you were laughing.
That's really wonderful.
Do you want me to try that again?
No, I think you made a really good point afterwards, and I don't want to disrupt that, which is why I kind of held it back. But that's really great, man. That's a good summation.
So, I mean, the Irish were very inclusive. So there's that.
It looks to me, after reading the back of this book...
That's more than I've done. What's the book about?
It's about the way that Irish basically saved world history and literacy.
Oh?
Yeah. It's talking about the Book of Kells and how a whole bunch of Irish priests and monks came together and saved as much literature as they could in their monasteries. It should be a pretty fun book.
It should.
It should.
We'll see.
I think it looks neat.
Sam, the next book I picked up is Green Berets, SEALs, and Spetsnaz, U.S. and Soviet Special Military Operations by John M. Collins. I remember distinctly seeing that book myself and thinking, that's interesting. Then I looked inside and was like, this looks too complicated. I bet Sam would like this.
Really? Oh,
yes.
Buckaroo. I went to the library sale the day before you did. This is a book I put back because it was in the super priced book section, not the cheaper ones.
Okay.
So they went through, weeded out the books.
Someone stole it.
Exactly. It was me. Somebody weeded through the books and like, okay, this isn't selling. We're going to put it out here with the cheaper books. That's when you found it. So this is actually a book I had picked up, but it's more than $1. So I am delighted you found it. Doubly delighted that you found it and picked it up for me to put in my bag. This book is just so cool. It's a report written for Congress
Really?
about the efficaciousness of Green Berets and SEALs. And it was written comparing them to the Spetsnaz, which is Russian special forces. So it's talking about, are we effective and how can we be more effective?
Oh, that's interesting.
This is a book with some perspective behind it. It's funny you mentioned the table of contents. The table of contents is what has me the most excited about this book.
Really?
The actual contents of this book are the first 70 of 157 pages. The rest are all appendices.
Listeners, he has a very evil grin on his face right now, like a child seeing Christmas for the first time.
I am so excited to read this book. The appendices are so cool looking.
It wasn't even the index that turned me off. It was seeing that it looked like it was written by a typewriter.
Yes, it is all in typeface, which is like, another reason I love this book. This is the exact worst book for Bryce, the best book for Sam. It goes through and it talks about the different uses for it and the different kinds of conflicts in which special operations could be used. It just looks so cool.
Do you think it'll distinguish between when to use SEALs and when to use Green Berets?
I don't know. I think it's more a general, what are the actual uses of these, and helping Congress, who are in charge of funding these missions and funding these divisions, to be able to see how much they are needed and how much they can be relied on. That's my guess of it. And because it's in the 80s, you got to compare it to the competition side. So that's going to be really fun to see. Number one, what people thought about the Russians during the 80s, the Russian Spetsnaz teams, and two, to see the actual workings of the Navy SEAL teams as well.
That would be interesting.
This library book sale is probably the best book sale I've ever been to when it comes to espionage and special forces nonfiction books.
And heaven knows you've never done an espionage book on this podcast.
Almost a third of the books I got were espionage or special forces books. I mean, a professor must have died or something. I can see no other way this would have happened. Next book you got here is The Flawed Genius of World War II, Winston Churchill by Christopher Catherwood.
Of course. Winston Churchill is one of those figures enjoyed by Americans more than the country he actually served.
Okay.
I watched
just like Jerry Lewis.
I watched The Darkest Hour, which was
Gary Oldman?
Gary Oldman, yes. Thank you. As Winston Churchill, leading into being elected prime minister and giving his famous, we'll fight in the streets, we'll fight in the landing grounds speech, just like the backstabbing in a sense that he faced through Parliament. I mean, it's just such an interesting movie. Glad I got this book. I can now look more into the life of Winston Churchill.
Okay.
As an interesting individual who I don't know a lot about, but I definitely have a lot of respect for.
This is like a fun book.
I definitely think this is one of the books I grabbed on the second sweep around through the history.
Sure.
I haven't read much about Winston Churchill. I don't know too much about him, so he definitely would not have been picked up on that first sweep of the history section.
What are you expecting to get out of this?
Well, I was really hoping to learn about the flawed genius.
Okay, fine. Fine.
Sorry.
You said it was your second pass through to pick this one up.
Sure.
What was it that finally said yes? Was it just, I know Winston Churchill. Let's find out more?
I think that was probably just about it. The fact that I knew that his mother is an American, that he was born in a bathtub.
Weren't we all? We don't need to say who was and who wasn't born in a bathtub here. It's fine.
And whose parents were Americans and who weren't. Sam, one of my all-time favorite Matt Damon films is The Martian.
Is Good Will Hunting.
That's not what we're talking about. I do have that as a book, though.
Oh, really?
We should have a special Matt Damon episode and not tell our guests. Wait, you did a Matt Damon book? I did a Matt Damon book! Sam, this is honestly one of the best films I've seen in the past year, and then they turned it into a book. The Martian by Andy...
Oh, you jerk. Oh, you big jerk.
I wonder if the book will be as good as the movie.
That is the meanest thing you've ever said on this podcast.
Somewhere Andy just had a heart attack.
Yeah, poor Andy.
The author was Andy Weir?
We're not sure how to pronounce it.
Weir. It was The Martian.
This is a movie that I saw and I genuinely loved. And before I saw the movie, I had heard some stories about this book. It was released in a very unconventional way. He released it free online in small segments as he was writing it. And then he released it for free. And then somebody was like, we'd really rather give you money for this. He was like, okay, I'll sell it. And then it became this huge runaway hit. And then it became the movie. I'm a bit behind on it, but I really, really genuinely enjoyed the movie. I thought it was a very bold choice to remake The Terminal in space. And So I thought, I enjoy science fiction. I haven't read too much modern science fiction, and this is supposed to be fairly hard science fiction, and that could be pretty fun too. So I just thought, let's pick up The Martian. This is going to be a lot of fun. Plus, look at the look on Matt Damon's face on the cover. What is he thinking about?
I would put that on my nightstand every night, just to fall asleep to Matt Damon's face looking at me.
Really, what is he trying to evoke on this picture? He looks incredulous about something. Probably incredulous about Mars.
Yeah.
Really, Mars?
Come on.
Come on.
I made potatoes.
Come on! Boston!
From what you were saying, he released it online. Was that, do you think, so that he could get, like, the science behind it, maybe read by other people and maybe edited?
I don't think he was having it troubleshot.
He just wanted to share, like, a interesting sci-fi.
I almost think this was his first book.
Debut novel, The Martian, was later adapted.
It is his first book. Okay, so it is his first book. What a beginning.
Only downhill from here.
I don't know. Like, if he wrote one good book, he can write two, I think. But I'm excited to read this. This book has so much buzz, and it's been recommended by a lot of people who I respect. I think, too, it'll be interesting to read somebody's first book. That'll be, I think, a really fun book to read.
Interesting.
Oh, yeah.
Nice.
I'm looking forward to it. Now, something you're looking forward to, I'm sure. Hellfighters of Harlem, African-American soldiers who fought for the right to fight for their country by Bill Harris.
I think this is actually one of the books I picked up the first time. I've definitely heard a lot of Black history through World War II about how, you know, even though they're fighting alongside white soldiers, they aren't treated as equals, even though they've earned that right. Mm-hmm. And the fact, like, they made, like, all black battalions and things like that.
On the American side, yeah.
I'll just say companies. I don't know if it was whole battalions. That book is probably going to speak a lot to the fact that not only were they fighting for their country, but they were fighting for themselves to be seen as equals.
Right.
That, you know, a German bullet isn't racist. It's going to shoot at black as much as it's going to shoot at white.
One of the few of the Nazi things that was not racist was their bullets.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Especially like the Hellfighters. These were pilots, I'm pretty sure. Maybe I'm thinking of the, no, I'm thinking of the, there is a whole regiment of, like, black pilots.
Yeah. George Lucas.
And actually, I'm only now seeing it, that it says on the back that they're from World War I, so now I've lost interest. I'm thinking of the Tuskegee Airmen as the pilot.
Yeah,
I finally thought of the...
Okay, I'll start over. Now that we're starting over, why did you pick up and not put down the Harlem Hellfighters of... the Harlem Fighters of Hell?
I picked up this book, assuming it was about World War II. I quickly found out that it was not.
Not so quickly. It's been months.
Yes. These are African-American soldiers fighting in a war where they don't get respect from their allies, like the men that fighting alongside, just because of the color of their skin. So not only are they fighting Germans and whoever else the enemy was in World War I, Italy, I'm pretty sure they were bad back then, but they're also fighting prejudice. The amount that I know about World War II is a skyscraper compared to the lemonade stand I know of World War I.
Well, what's going to be fun, though, is since these are the guys coming home from World War I, that means these are the guys that are part of the Harlem Renaissance, part of the Jazz Age. Yeah. I mean, that's going to be a fun book. It'll be interesting to see how the guys who came home affected that whole world.
Yeah.
And because these guys are fighting in Europe, they're not just fighting alongside Americans. They're fighting along with Englishmen and Frenchmen.
Sure.
Who are much nicer to black people than the white people of America. Mm-hmm. And this is something we saw in World War II, was also the black men coming home and returning from countries who were not segregated, where they could drink from any water fountain they wanted to, coming back to America and being told not to drink this water fountain.
I know, especially after World War II, black soldiers felt that same segregation when they came back. It's like, I can't even be treated like a soldier. And so I think these guys fighting way back here in World War I as African-American soldiers, it's a fight that they helped maybe become the leaders of, but it's something that we definitely didn't fix back in World War I.
Definitely think World War I and World War II exposed it more.
Sure.
The fact that America came onto the world stage in World War I and World War II and still had racism compared to the people it was fighting alongside it. That kind of, I think, exposed the scar more and helped it along a lot. And having these black soldiers being pulled out of that paradigm and then being pulled back into that paradigm, that's got to shake things up somehow.
Sam, once again, you've brought another book that you haven't read. I'm running out of interest in books.
Here's another book. You know?
Is that how you say it?
That's why they call you Mr. Color Commentary.
World War II Secret Operations Handbook. SOE, OSS, and Maquis?
I believe it's Marquis, which is the French Resistance.
Okay.
It is a book all about, as the title says, World War II Secret Operations.
Now, OSS was the American side.
Yes.
And
the American
SOE was...
Officer of Strategic Services, Special Operations Executive, which is the British.
Okay, so I was going to say it's American and British.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And the French.
Okay.
So these are all the people who are going into Fortress Europe to do the missions that are going to be able to help disrupt things against the Nazis. This is a how-to book!
Really?
Yes, it goes through all the methods. Let me just give you a quick example of the proper way to do a chin jab.
Oh!
Yes, the combat section has diagrams showing you exactly close combat techniques used by the SOE. It is a very practical how-to book, and it's divided up into sections based on the parts of a successful operation. So chapter 1 is insertion, how to get into the enemy-occupied territory. 2nd is behind enemy lines. 3 is working undercover. 4 is intelligence gathering. 5 is sabotage. 6 is combat. And 7th is extraction.
Interesting.
This is heavily illustrated. It's got tons of interesting bits and pieces. It is a how-to book. It is not just history. And that's going to be a lot of fun. There are so many things I should not even try to do in this book.
But you're going to.
Oh, but going to. This book is just going to be so much fun to read. This is one of those books that it may not have existed until I walked towards the table. My desire for there to be a book like this just popped into being.
I think that's the equivalent of me finding a book that says, Harry Potter wants to be your friend.
Hogwarts is real, and here's your letter. Just a quick example.
Yes.
Here is how you sneak up on a sentry to stab him in the gut while pulling back his head so he can't make noise. This is a step-by-step instruction on how to take out a sentry silently. Another good one. This is partisan arson technique. Step 1. Empty the contents of 2 matchbooks, about 100, onto a cloth and spread them out. 2. Puncture the cloth all over to let in air. 3. Douse the cloth with oil. And I'll skip the rest of the stages because I don't want you to do it at home.
I was going to say, listeners, if you're going to do this at home, please send us a video.
Yes, please show us what happened. I'm looking forward to that one quite a bit. That's going to be a lot of fun to read. I don't know what possessed somebody to give away this book. Somebody had to have died to get rid of this. Because if you're the kind of person who picks up books like this, you're not going to get rid of this book. This is too cool. Now, Bryce.
Yes.
This is a book that I got to say is very you.
Hilarious. Oh.
You got it in the comedy section, no doubt. But this is a book that's very you. I can see exactly why you picked this up. But I'm looking forward to hearing you articulate it. This is Preserving Memory, The Struggle to Create America's Holocaust Museum by Edward T. Leinenthal.
Yeah. Looking at it, I definitely assumed it was about the creation of the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., which I had visited a number of years ago. Previous podcast I had mentioned, I think it was, we were talking of Mice and Men. Even though it has a sad ending, a good book like that leaves you saying, how do I live my life now?
Good books should make you think.
And I think that's how I exited the Holocaust Museum. I don't know how to go out and live my life now, knowing that all this occurred.
Right.
I can still remember these horrific sites in the Holocaust Museum and knowing that they were true. And then you just have to go on living your life once you leave.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is an interesting book of maybe trying to figure out where they got all these. They have like thousands and thousands of photos, like personal family photos of people who were killed in the Holocaust. They also have like a train car full of shoes. It's not just like replicas, it's like the real deal. And I definitely have a lot of respect for that place and a lot of interest, I guess you could say, respectable interest, I guess, in what happened. And so learning about this museum, maybe what struggles they would have had, I think is interesting enough that I'm willing to pick up that book.
That does look like a fun book.
Fun.
Okay. It sounds like an interesting book. I'm sorry. I have fun reading books.
Yes. I understood what you said, but I don't want it to be misconstrued.
You don't know the history of the museum at all?
I don't.
It looks like there's enough for a long book. This is not a small book, so I'll be curious to hear what...
I flipped through it real quick, and this is actually a book I picked up, I put down, and then in my second loop around...
I think you did the hokey pokey, and then you...
And then I turned about.
Yeah.
Anyway.
But you picked it back up again?
Yes, I put it down, I walked away, and on my second loop around, I was like, well, I still have plenty of room in my bag, and this is a book I was semi-interested in. I'll pick it up.
Did you try to say goodbye, and then you choked, tried to walk away, and then you stumbled? In fact, when you hide it, it's clear.
Oh, Sam.
Your world crumbles when you are not there.
Macy Gray.
Don't act like I don't know every Macy Gray song.
And I choke, try to walk away, and I stumble. Though I try to hide it, it's clear. My world crumbles when you are not here.
Oh, no matter what, this is staying in. No matter what.
Okay. Yeah.
So back to the Holocaust Museum. We don't have to go back. Do you have anything else you want to say?
I think we brought it out of the depth into a very light.
We basically had to do a Macy Gray at that point. Well, I think that does it for this sporadic and scatterbrained episode of Book Reports Podcast. Hope you've enjoyed seeing a little glimpse into the process we have for picking out books for ourselves to pick up and read. And hopefully you'll be hearing from these books later on. Hopefully we've enjoyed them enough once we've read them to bring them to you a second time. And hopefully we got everything absolutely right about these books we haven't read. I'd like to emphasize again, we have not read these books. We are judging books by their covers. If you have enjoyed this episode, that's great. We've got a bunch more that are not very similar to it. We've got a bunch more episodes where we talk about 2 or 3 books in far more depth. You can find them on iTunes and YouTube. Please rate and review us. It helps people find the show. And if you're listening on YouTube, hey, we can always use another listen. That's great. You can find us on Facebook. Feel free to like the page. It's always wonderful. You can contact us on Facebook or comment on YouTube, or you can review us on iTunes, or if you want a complete direct approach that doesn't help us in any way, like rating us on iTunes, you can send us an email at bookreportspodcast@gmail.com. If you would like just a little bit more of me in an exciting, readable way, you can find my blog at skullduggeryandthesmoke.blogspot.com, where you can find all my game writing. I've finished 2 books on Constantinople, so I'll be heading back into Victorian London, where I'll start writing about the good classic Victorian stereotypes that we know and love. Our intro music is by Kevin MacLeod. You can find more of his music at incomputech.com.
I do want to add quick, we finally reached a huge milestone for us. We passed the 1,000 download mark, so congratulations to us.
Who thought we'd get this far? Well done. Well, hey, everybody who downloaded us, thank you. Yes. Go download us again so we can get 2,000 really, really quickly. That'd be great. But thank you so much, everybody who has downloaded or listened to the show. That is fantastic. I hope you've gotten something out of this. Let's hope. Let's hope you're getting something out of it. But thanks very much for listening. We appreciate every listen, every comment, every email, every rating. I'm Sam Tyler.
I'm Bryce Diener.
And thanks very much for listening 1,000 times to Book Reports Podcast. It's written by Timely. Look at me go. It is written by Timely Naftali.
No, you said it wrong again.
You jerk. You big jerk. Jerk.
Masterpiece Theater.
Bryce wins.
Bryce wins this episode. This is Bryce's win.